should be in the highest places in Gan Eden, should have pleasure from the Shekhinah and from the words of the Torah spoken by Hashem himself. We have this concept of learning Torah from Hashem himself. Rabbi Nachman talks about it, Rabbi Avraham Azulai talks about it. It is a concept that a little scary, I think, for some people, but we could learn Torah from each other for now. Okay, so tonight's class is a Tu B'Shvat meditation entitled Uniting Heaven and Earth Through Man and Woman. Now, we're going to deal with some basic concepts we have mentioned in the past, but with little differences and subtleties, hopefully that'll make it something new and special. The work of the Torah itself really has everything in it, but the work is finding what we need for any particular time and place. And you know, Rav Vadia Yosef, alav shalom, wants to find a Talmid Chacham as a person who knows whatever question is asked him, he knows where to look for the answer in the Torah. So somehow that's gotten immensely simple by dialing in Rabbi Google or any of the other Torah outlets that are out there. We can get answers to every question almost. But of course, it does not disregard what is written twice in Pirkei Avot, Aseh lecha Rav, make for yourself a Rav, have someone you go to personally, privately, because the ascendancy and the holiness of the relationship is what we're really after. We want a relationship with someone who knows more than us, somebody who knows us intimately and then can answer us where we are, not where the book says you should be. Because our generation is different than any other generation, I'm sure. And I'm sure probably every other generation thought the same thing. So it's not a competition of differences in generations. But it is important to know that we have access, we have the information we need, we can get, but we need the relationship. Because applying the Torah is much more a subtle art than simply learning the halachot. One way someone asked recently, I said, is that the Torah, you know, it gives us a path, but you can still get lost on a path, you know, and so we need somebody that can guide us through it. And thank God there are great teachers in our generation that have helped us along. And certainly Rabbi Nachman stands high and above many because of the fact that he did die 210 years ago. And his works are more alive than they ever were. He has more followers than he ever had when he was alive. And that all teaches us something very interesting about his teachings. The fact that more people than ever learn the Zohar. It's outrageous because this Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai passed away 2,000 some odd years ago. And so when we look at Judaism, how Judaism measured things is very interesting. It doesn't measure things in the standard physical material ways. Judaism measures results and the impact of what we do. So we have to remember that, and remember that we don't know who we are. We don't know really what we're here to do. We're trying. But in 20 years and in 40 years, you might look back on your life and you'll just be amazed. And I do. I look back at the 30 years that I've been in the Torah in a serious way, trying to be serious. I'm not always trying to be serious, believe me, you know, but I'm just amazed. And I bless you all with that amazement and that journey. As you go forward in your Torah life, And looking back always, Rabbi Nachman said he could never spend the same one moment at the same level. He was always striving for more. And this is a guide that we can trust. Because the minute we want to stay at one level, we're already in the descent. All right. So tonight, Tu B'Av, this wonderful, unique Jewish day, which has become kind of a wedding, a celebration of marriage, of shidduchim, of making shidduchim. Of course, most people know that it's based on some very, very painful, difficult events from the Tanakh. That there was a man from the tribe of Yehuda who had a pelegish, which, I don't think the word girlfriend does a pelegish justice. In our generation, there really isn't a word that reflects this relationship between a man and woman where she's not married, and yet they are obliged to each other on various levels, not including, of course, decency and dignity and respect, but things like taking care of each other, and that a man can't just, have a girlfriend. There's no such thing in Judaism. The Rambam writes, and he wrote this, of course, 900 years ago, and it's not very popular today, I imagine. But if a man goes out with a woman with the idea of a one-night stand, he is taken out into the middle of the city square and given lashes. So, of course, in our generation, there are probably guys that like to get lashes. They like to show off their macho, but it's not it's not a laughing matter, because it shows that the intention of the person, the Rambam's language is zanut. The zanut is the root of the word zanut, which of course zona is the same root, means a prostitute, but the word is zan, which is a positive context. This word zan means to give nourishment. So why does it become the root word for all these other negative concepts that have to do with taking advantage of women? Well, I think the simplest idea is that the Torah itself tells us in the Parsha of Tzitzit that we have to make Tzitzit because Shelo taturu acharei einechem, that we won't go after our eyes. Because the eyes, you might not have thought of this. I know I didn't for a while, but it suddenly occurred to me that just like your mouth receives nutrition, and your nose even, and your ears all receive impulse and inspiration from the environment, of course your eyes receive from the environment. Well, what we don't understand is that Chokhmah is connected to the eyes, and you get a meal, you get nourishment of wisdom through the eyes. And so if we abuse that, we corrupt the system. We corrupt our ability to absorb wisdom through our eyes. Now, this might seem ridiculous what I'm going to say now, but I'm willing to take a chance, because I like you guys and I trust you. You'll judge me fairly, but I was at my Shabbos table maybe 15 years ago, and there was a woman there, because a lot of people coming through Bat Ayin and from all over, and this woman had been in India, and she said she had been in a town where there was a legend of a woman who lived in a tree, and she never ate. And she was like the original breatharian. Maybe you've heard that word. And we're all sitting there, Shabbos table, pass the chicken, tell me about this breatharian in between courses. But this woman went to see her, and she lived in a tree, and she was like, of course she was very skinny, but she breathed and breathed and breathed, and she was able to get nourishment through breath. Now that might sound like, another Indian guru story, and I don't need to take that seriously. But you know what? I did, because Rabbi Nachman says that you can get life force from wisdom, which is through the eyes and through breath. That our bodies generate power and energy if we just, get off the caffeine and the sugar we might actually discover that our food has power, you know. And I'm not preaching to the choir, but so just to understand how wrapped it tightly we are into the creation, that we can get power from everything around us. And that's what Adam experienced in the garden before he took on the sheath of his body, because he was a soul without a body before the whole fall. Okay. So that little experience was interesting. But we're talking about Tu B'Av, talking about this man who had this pelegesh, and he went to a town in Binyamin. And of course, maybe some of you have heard the story. I hope not in too much detail, but the people, some of the people of the town basically stole her, kidnapped her, raped her, and she died. And then, of course, there's outrage. And the tribe of Benjamin, was basically put on trial because they refused to give over the people responsible for that horrible event. So all the other tribes said, you're not going to give up the rapist, or there was more than one, unfortunately. Okay, then we're going to put a ban on you. We're not going to marry your daughters. And you see, there's this, it's a very interesting contradistinction. You are not going to hold up the honor of a Jewish woman. Well, then we're not going to marry your daughters. And that's the ban. And it was passed throughout all the 11 tribes. And well, what happened was, of course, year after year, as the ban started to sink in, less and less marriages were taking place in the tribe of Benjamin. And they started losing members. Not losing members, it's not a club, right? Benjamin was a large tribe. They're responsible for the whole northern area of Jerusalem, including most of the area of the Beit HaMikdash, which is a tremendous honor. And at a certain point, the rabbis were, learning and talking, and they said, what are we going to do? We can't allow one of the tribes of God to be destroyed. We've levied this punishment against them. And a lot of time had passed. I don't know how much time. It's a good question. How much time before they rescinded the decree? But they realized that we cannot allow the tribe of Benjamin to just disperse, because, in any normal societal, maybe you need a PhD in sociology to figure this out, but if nobody is marrying into the tribe of Benjamin and they have to marry amongst themselves, it's going to be an imbalance in the tribe, especially when there's wars being fought and incursions being fought and, diseases, etc. And so there's always these mixings of tribes in order to create a balance or a continuous growth in the nation. It's not a new idea. You look at other countries and histories where various events have occurred that cause depopulation, which seems to be a kind of a current topic lately, but we're not going to go there. Okay, so they rescinded the decree, and the day that the decree was rescinded was Tu B'Av, the 15th of Av, which I believe is tomorrow night, Shabbat, a perfect day for that. And it became a little more because they used it as a kind of a great, an economic equalizer. Is what happened is all the girls, all the women, and there were a lot of girls too. I mean, people used to get married very young back then. 13, 14 years old was common. Of course, the maturity level of a 13, 14-year-old back then might be a little different, I imagine, than it is today. And of course, lifespans were different. And I think I read a study recently that said that actually a woman's body is most able to endure the birth process when she's younger, much younger than, 30, 40, etc. Okay. So all the women agreed, and this was a tacit agreement. It was no rule, it was no law, it was no custom. In the beginning, it was just women, they all agreed, we all want to get married, so we're all going to wear the same dresses, white dresses, because back in the day, the guys were looking out for the girls with money. I don't think that's too different today. There's certain men that are on that level where they're not looking for love, they're looking for a meal ticket, unfortunately. And so the woman who had money would, of course, dress more fancy with more jewelry, etc., and show off, and that would attract that energy, that power. And they didn't want that happening. They wanted it to be fair and open, that everybody would look more or less in the same level. And I think that's part of the spirit of Tu B'Av, is let's return to the real values the Torah gives us, the rabbis and the saints and the prophets and their wives lived by. You don't marry for money in Judaism. Now I'm laughing, right, to myself, because guys have come over to my house and told me, Avraham, I want a shidduch. I said, okay, tell me about yourself. And like, well, I my yeshiva's promised me 80,000 shekels to get married if I learn a certain number of books. Then the father of my prospective wife will pay me. I'm like, well, okay, now what do we have? We have a system where certain fathers that have cash will pay to have the most learned guy marry his daughter. Does that sound bad? It might to a Western ear. It might to a non-Torah personality. It sounds pretty, looking for the right word for that. Pretty cold and businesslike. But in a culture where Torah is number one and not bank account, if a guy worked hard and made a lot of money and he wants to marry his daughter, to marry a learned, refined person, a person on a high level in all categories, then he's allowed to make that offer. It's not skullduggery, it's not it's not fighting for points in the pit at the NASDAQ. So or the stock exchange, I guess it's called. The NASDAQ is an index. Okay. So you see, it's subtle, this issue of money and marriage. And sometimes it's not subtle at all. When I was single and religious and dating, people would ask, so how are you going to make a living? Well, everybody, you got to come up with something good. At the time, I was in rabbinical school, and that was my goal. That was my desire to teach and to learn and to write and to do what I'm doing today. But it doesn't sell too well. Now, I didn't have a big white beard, so it was a little a little different. But it's a very special type of person that chooses Torah above standard of living. And that test goes on for every single Jew on this planet. Trust me, any Jew, especially if he's religious. Now, if he's not religious and he doesn't care about Torah and mitzvot, then he's not really, conducting himself in a Jewish context. He'll do mitzvot. The Lubavitcher Rebbe said there are no non-religious Jews. There are simply different levels of shomrei mitzvot. Some people keep one mitzvah. They get a brit milah when they're 8 days old and, c'est la vie. And other people try to keep every mitzvah. So it's important, these categories, for how we look at people, because they kind of color the way we think. But when we're talking about Tu B'Av and we're talking about meditation and we're talking about this grand concept, I'm doing this long introduction because we're going to get to the heart of the matter very shortly, cosmically, if you will, that we should not judge the Torah or the Torah people and the Torah way of doing things until we really investigate and really learn well about what the laws are, what the customs are, and why they are what they are. And so the rabbis who said we have to remarry and replenish the children of the tribe of Benjamin so that the tribe of God will not be erased. Some of them, I'm certain, knew that, of course, they all knew that there are 12 tribes above. There are 12 energy centers, which are structured according to the constellations, and each has an angel, a channel of power coming into it. And all these 12 tribes are only reflections down here in the human race of the upper structures of heaven. And if a tribe is lost, you can't just erase a constellation, and nothing is simply there without a purpose. And the more and there's a lot of astrology and astronomy in the Talmud, and anybody who loves science will find a lot of interesting things there that they will see the Talmud corroborated today from current findings. So, and these 12 structures, these 12 tribes, were renewed in our understanding of them by the Arizal, because he came along about, 470, 480 years ago, and introduced a new depth and vision of Kabbalah called the Kabbalah of the Partsufim. Now, Partsuf is literally, it means a face. But until the Arizal, up until the Ramak, who was really one of the last teachers that influenced the Arizal, the Torah of the Kabbalah was the 10 sfirot that make up the tree of life, the soul of a human being. It's a multi-layered composite structure. But the Arizal said it's not just one structure called man. It's 5 structures made of all 10. And those 5 all have 5, and they're the father and the mother, the daughter, the son and the daughter, and the crown above them all. Those 5 structures. Now, for some of you that have this is new information, it's okay. It's just like when you go into engineering, you get deeper and deeper levels of understanding a building. So we're understanding the building of creation here on a deeper level. That's what the Arizal brought us. That these 10 spheres that make up the soul are actually put into various faces that operate in what? Well, what does it sound like? A father, a mother, a son, a daughter. With a crown on top. Keter. We don't call it corona either. Keter. It's a family. That the universe is not modeled simply on a person, a human being. Ki ish eitz hasadeh, a man is a tree of the field. And so we say that the eitz haim is the structure of a man, but it's not so simple. It's really a family structure. The way that God contracts his infinite light down into vessels in which we can exist and relate and share and have consciousness and reunite the physical world with the spiritual world, which is what we're talking about here. The unification of heaven and earth is bringing heaven down to earth. We don't need to take earth up to heaven. No point. It's too dense down here. The spiritual realm is not dense. But what we want to do is unify the two. So the family structure is the structure that gives exactly what humanity needs to reach its fruition. I see we have a comment from Rhonda. I have a 22-year-old Hasidic son who would love to get married and keep learning. Okay, well, I would have to ask you 25 other questions, Rhonda, that I don't think everybody else here wants to hear right now. send me an email, and maybe we'll be able to, navigate that journey. My son is also almost 22, and he's looking. And it's a piece of work, getting married in the secular world is not easy. In the religious world, it is easier in certain ways, but other ways it's very hard. It's very hard to sit down in front of a woman you never met before with all your cards on the table. It's a real confrontation of your own mettle and your own confidence, and being confronted with that vulnerability. So send me an email, Rhonda. So, but the extended family, it begins by a father and a mother. They have two children, a son and a daughter. And of course, this represents the faces we just mentioned, called Abba and Ima, Za, Zer Anpin, the small face, which of course, small face refers to the complete structure of the upper face, which is way up in what we call the Keter of Atzilut, which is Arich Anpin, the long face, and above that is even a higher level called Atik Yomin, the Ancient of Days, who was the Ancient of Days was revealed to Daniel the prophet in the book of Daniel. You can read about him over there, because he gave that classic personification of God, of the godly form, having a long white flowing beard and curly hair, and but those are very high levels within the transcendent level of the mind. But still, we have this nuclear family. Now, none of what we're going to learn now is chauvinistic, not against men or women. So hold on. If you have an urge to feel touched, hold it. Hold it. It'll make you stronger. Because like I said, when we learn Torah, especially Kabbalah, we have to suspend certain preconceived notions we have about reality before we get the solution that heals us. Okay, so Za, Zer Anpin, is called in Kabbalah heaven. And Nukva, which is the feminine aspect, which is called the queen or Malka, or I like calling her the princess because she's at the next generation down, the queenship, if you will, that's called earth. So the whole concept of Mother Earth is actually very solidly rooted in Kabbalah. Mother Russia and Mother, all the countries like to say Mother Germany, Mother, I don't know. I no one ever said Mother Florida, but maybe, I don't know, maybe where I'm from. But Mother Earth is the whole idea. Why? Because the earth gives forth life. Heaven it's invisible, like most men, till they show up. But so when we're learning about this paradigm, this union of heaven and earth, we understand automatically that man and male power, male energy, male qualities are going to be more reflected in the spiritual context, and the feminine aspect is going to be the grounding, the reproductive power, the family unifier, the one who makes the human race tick. Without women, forget it. Men are dangerous as they are. Okay. And now another interesting idea that's important to have in our set of ideas here is that every week this male-female dyad, the Za, Zer Anpin, and Nukva, unify and elevate on Shabbat. And they go up to the upper worlds. And this elevation of the weekday into Shabbat is a wedding. It's a weekly wedding. Okay, and so what is a wedding in Kabbalah? Well, it's the union of forces. But of course, they're invisible forces. But it does not negate the idea that male energy and female energy go together and create a whole. And that's happening here in the three-dimensional plane as well, with the 6-day work week and Shabbat. So in that paradigm, of course, the work week is the feminine, and the heaven or the Shabbat is the energy that comes down to us and then unifies with us and lifts us back into Shabbat. So that's why on Friday afternoon, it's so important to be spiritually ready for Shabbat. It's a mitzvah to take on an extra hour if you can. It's even, the rabbis say it's even doraita. They bring out proof from Pesukim that God actually wanted us to take on Shabbat an hour early. I'm usually like at the bell, the finish line, but that's a different story. The point, though, is that we know that Friday afternoon, all the energy of the weekday, all the feminine energy of efforts that we make are now gathered and ready to be unified with Shabbat and lifted up into the transcendental realm, which is, according to what we've been learning, going to be accomplished by this union of the male and female on Friday afternoon, Friday evening, Friday night. And you can feel it. It's not this high cosmic, it is a high cosmic moment, but it's not a trip. It's not, like a rainbow, festival. All right. You simply feel yourself focused. You simply are onto the spiritual reality in front of you, and the external world doesn't hold us anymore. That's already the elevation of Shabbat. That's already the elevation of a person who's besieged by this physical world all week long and suddenly gets freedom for one day, to be free from all the things that don't want to let us go. The mall doesn't want to let you go. Facebook doesn't want to let you go. Your boss certainly doesn't want to let you go. But on Shabbat, it's already set up for us. And the energy is going to come down, and you literally, I feel like a car wash. Now, I could try to go to the mikvah Erev Shabbat, but it's like a psychic car wash. When Shabbat comes down, the external world is done. And we get that focus. That's because the male and the female are uniting, and they're beginning the ascendancy that ends at the mincha prayer. At the exact moment we say Keter. If you look in the Kavanot, the Shar Kavanot of the Arizal, when we say Keter Yitnu Lecha in Mincha of Shabbat, that's the high point of the week. When all the forces have been gathered together to be taken, because all those forces have sparks, and the sparks are pieces of Hashem that He let come down to here, or we brought down to here, whether we dragged down here or forced down here, depends on how you did it, right? They're going to be taken back up. Now, the Ramak, Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, teaches, and it's repeated in many places. I just happened to see it recently in his book, Tomer Devora. He says that humans must resemble the divine structure that we're talking about in order to receive the Shekhinah. So if you want to receive Shekhinah, okay, you can, there are many formulas in the Torah and in Kabbalah and Hasidut. There's all kinds of, you can go to the hospital to visit the sick. There's a Shekhinah over every sick person's head. I'm not sure you're going to see it or feel it or know it or be afraid, but nowadays you better have a mask, right? But that's because the Shekhinah comes down on the sick person. The Shekhinah dwells between a husband and wife who have peace. The Shekhinah dwells when one person is learning Torah Lishma. The Shekhinah dwells in the Aron HaKodesh, where the Sefer Torah is. So it's a very interesting thing I wrote here. That this is a reason why the old Kabbalists like Rav Kaduri, Rav Shirabi, and other people that I've had the merit to know, they will get married even if they're 80 or 90 or 100 years old. If Lo Aleinu that they should, the previous wife would leave this world, they would remarry. Because they understand without a feminine half, I am not a whole being. It's not, it's my lack. It's not a put down. And it's not a woman's put down to a woman that she needs a man to be whole either. It's based on the structure. It is not chauvinistic. And any woman who's been married to a proper Jew, a man of spirit and mitzvot, is going to tell you that he treats me good. And if he doesn't, it has nothing to do with the Torah. It has to do with his mind and his heart and his midot and his bad childhood. I don't know. That's what therapy's for. Okay? But the Torah teaches a man to be a mensch, to be a good guy with his wife and his family. And we're doing the best we can. Nobody's perfect. But, if you look at the numbers, the Jewish people are doing pretty good overall, I think. So anyways, so the Shekhinah is with a human being. Guess where? Other times. When a man goes out on the derech because he's a traveling salesman, the Shekhinah is with him. Now, why? Why do you think? Anybody have an answer? Come on. You don't make me answer all my questions. It's not fair. Well, one of the answers is because if a man wants to guard himself, being on the road is the hardest place to guard yourself. You leave town, no one knows you, you can do whatever you want. It's not a good situation for a person trying to fight his Yetzer Hara. So the Shekhinah comes along. What does the Shekhinah do? If he's married, if he's a good guy, if he wants to keep the Torah, she actually protects him on the derech from getting tempted and falling into temptation. Now you say, what? Is that an experience of the Shekhinah? It seems like a counterintuitive experience. I'm not being tested. And that's the way God protects me? Yes. And the Ramak brings another example. When a woman is in her cycle, God protects the man from wanting her by sending the Shekhinah upon him that takes away his desire to be with his wife when it is that time of the month. That's another Shekhinah? What? So you see that the Shekhinah, our experience of it is not exactly what we think. It's not about a spiritual high. It's about keeping the Torah as best as we can and having the guidance, the guidance right there in front of us. Okay, so those are some examples that are interesting. But the idea of not being married is just completely anathema in Torah life because of these reasons. Not because we're old-fashioned. There's no such thing as old-fashioned in Judaism. It is just the law of God. And God is new every minute, so the law is new every minute. It depends on how you want to frame it. You want to say we're old-fashioned? Well, I think it's pretty modern if you look at what's going on out there in the world. Okay, now how are we doing on time? Just checking in. Okay, we're good. Now, a woman also must get married. Now, we understand there is no direct command in the Torah for human beings to get married, as we understand it. The Rambam writes that before the Torah was given, if a guy went out to the shuk, to the marketplace, and he saw a woman he liked, he could take her home. And he'd have to, but anybody that could stop him would either be the brothers or the father of the girl that he was taking, if she didn't want. And before the Torah, they didn't have contracts between a father and a man who's getting that guy's daughter. There were no contracts. There were no obligations. And you see, so the Torah introduced a lot of new ideas in its day. But that, even though the man is required, the Torah requires him to get married, not from that aspect, but it says about Adam, when God created Adam and Eve, remember, they were created hermaphrodites. They were one soul, male, female. They were androgynous. It was one soul, male, female, and then Eve was extracted from Adam's essence. Eve is the inner essence of Adam. The feminine is the kingship within the man. And when they're together, it's not male or female, it's one. So when God created Hava, he was extracting the essence of Adam and bringing her from back to back to face, so he could have a real experience of what a relationship is about. Now, but we learn out the idea of the necessity of marriage from Lo Tov Liot Levado Aselo Ezer Kenegdo. The Torah says it is not good for a man to be alone. A man. Aselo Ezer Kenegdo, I will make a helpmate. It doesn't say it's not good for a woman to be alone. And statistics prove this out for a long time. That when men are single and they die younger, they're less healthy, they're less productive, they achieve less in the world when a man stays single. That's all because of this lo tov leot levado. It's not good for a man to be alone. And we see that women do much better when they stay than single men. When the women stay single, they don't get as sick, they don't die as young, they're still productive and creative, and they do a lot of good things in the world. And my wife was quite learned about nature and animals. She pointed out to me that if you look at all, like a wolf pack, a lion's pride, elephant troops, I don't know what they're called, elephant troops, I don't know. All these animals that move in these social groups, there's always one leader, and then all the others, they either have to replace the leader by fighting him and defeating him, or they will not get a female partner. And that old concept called the lone wolf, it's because of this. Because the nature, the way God designed these many societies, is that the female needs to be attached to the strongest male. If you want to take it all the way to Darwin, you can. I don't have a problem with some, Darwin was right about certain things and he was wrong about a lot of things. But the idea of the survival of the fittest is a real concept. And so we see this in the human interaction and also in the animal kingdom. And so like wolves that don't have a mate, they either have to fight for the head wolf for the mate, or convince another one to split off and start his own group, which wasn't an easy thing either. Okay, and so we see here, what are we learning from this? That it's not good for a man to be alone, because he not only does he not have his other half, his own internal self in front of him as his wife, but he descends to all these single types of behaviors. And I don't even need to talk about that. That what men are like when they're single, they're not responsible. They don't need to answer. They don't have to get up. Of course, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I think you all know exactly what I mean. The single scene is proof enough of what that does to the human dignity, to human pride, to our strength for who we are, and our respect for each other. And I don't need to beat that too much, but let's keep going. Now, another example why the women make a blessing in the morning, she'asani karotzono. I was always jealous of women that they get to make that blessing. I wish that God said he made me according to his will. No, my blessing is that he didn't make me a woman. It's a negative position. Thanks God for not making me a woman. And the rabbis say, well, it's your blessing is that you get a lot more mitzvot so you can climb to a higher level. Well, that's okay. It's kind of a reward. It is a reward to have so many mitzvot, to do God's will in so many ways, because women don't have as many mitzvot because they got to take care of families in the classic Jewish model. Now, but sha'asani karatzono, what does that mean when a woman makes that blessing in the morning? He made me like his will. It means that God didn't make man like his will. Now, how could that be? How could it be Can we say that? It seems like the blessing is certainly pushing that. That God made man not exactly according to his will. And I've wrestled this question for a long, long time. And I've read the commentators, and being from the 21st century, it's hard to read a medieval commentator who's not really on the same page. Obviously, those great rabbis from the Middle Ages know a lot more than I will ever know. But my socialization, my education, my experience is telling me something else is here. And so what occurred to me, you can tell me if you agree or disagree, is that when a woman says, God made me like his will, what is God's will? God's will is continuously to reproduce reality. God is constantly reproducing reality. God is constantly creating. What is that? That's a feminine thing. That's a female idea. Constantly creating, constantly giving birth to reality. So God's will was to create a creature that could be like him, to constantly create. Whether it's babies or Shabbos meals or it's corporations, that's your business. But women are notoriously creative. Now, I've been teaching in a women's school for over 20 years, and of course have worked with women in my practice, and also in one-on-one teaching and in group teaching. And women are much more pleasant to work with, guys. Sorry, Ariel, don't take it personal. Yaakov, I love you, but men are tough. Men, we have this logical mindset that we're gonna fight every speck, every piece of that comes down my way. Whereas women are naturally, they receive information and they process it and they work with it and they do something with it. And that, I think it's there in that blessing. Shasani Kurutsono. Whereas man, we have this power and this rebellion, this energy that doesn't want to receive so quickly. Now maybe that's good. And maybe that's why the snake attacked Hava and not man first. And the Zohar says that when the snake bit Hava, it's the pasuk is ki anachash nashach et Hava legaba. He bit her from behind. Now there's a lot of drashot that can be developed out of that idea. What is the snake? What is Hava? Okay, that's already, we talked about that many times. But the idea of biting her from behind means that she's not going to know what's coming, right? And this is, if you notice, and I noticed it about myself, the Yetzer Hara always shows up when I'm not expecting him, like it happened in the beginning. And so there's a reason why the snake, right? This negative force attacked woman first. And I think it has to do with it right here, because the snake knew if he could get Hava, then man would be easy to break. But with Hava, man is very hard to break. And very hard to, when a man has a wife and he's dedicated, then he is going to resist a lot of the negativity that's out there. Whereas a single guy, it's very hard, difficult. So we should all be happy with the blessings that God and the rabbis gave us to make, and understand them at depth, because they'll mean more to us when we make them. Okay, and so a woman, of course, she's embedded with this every week, hopefully not, ladies, every month, right? A new egg wants to be born. I just saw a tiny microscopic picture of the birth of an egg that was embedded in the wall of a uterus. Unbelievable science nowadays. And a woman's nature is to want to reproduce because she's making those eggs. Well, actually, they're all made at birth and they come out once a month. So her urge is to create a human life. A man's urge, well, it's to share his seed. It's a completely different thing. And the urge is different. And the power embedded in those activities is different. Obviously, a woman's power is more internal and more important, so to speak, to the human race, because she's only going to put out one batch of eggs a month, whereas a man can, you know, give out seed a lot more than once a month. So what does that tell us? It tells us that man has this chaotic energy and women have this orderly, constructive, patterned energy. I know these are general concepts. They sound a little new agey. I'm sorry. It's easier to talk about in this language than to start putting it in a lot of Kabbalistic terms that I'm going to have to translate anyways. So a woman's natural state is to seek order, and a man's natural state is to seek chaos. And so that's why God created man and women to get together, because man needs the order, because he's got that chaotic power. And woman, she's got that orderly power. She needs a little energy, a little chaos, a little of that wild. I don't know, it's not a very nice word, but the idea, of course, is the two together create something new. And so God split us along these lines in order to bring us back together. Of course, to reveal his presence through the process. Now, why is it that man has this chaotic power? And why is it that women have this orderly, this structured, this pattern power? Well, I believe it's because it takes a lot of order and structure to raise a family. You have to stay home with these kids, these babies, or somebody does, right? And that's how it's been for thousands of years. If the woman doesn't stay home to raise those babies, it's going to be a problem, a big problem. And so women naturally have that ordered way about them. They keep a home and keep a life built that children can grow and flourish and learn in. And men, they have to go out and conquer the world every day and bring home the bread, et cetera, et cetera. All the old cliches are cliches for a reason. And in our generation, of course, Rav Kook wrote, and it's based on what Pharaoh did to the Jews in Egypt. Pharaoh made the Jews he made the Jewish slaves that were men do women's work, and made the Jewish women slaves do men's work in order to break them of their identity, of their own natural tendency. And it's a deep evil, what Pharaoh did. Well, Rav Kook said it would, in the end, in the times of Mashiach, men will do women's work and women will do men's work. So it's nothing new. It's happening all over again. Now, not that I don't look, studies have been done that women are much better workers in many, many situations in the workforce. But I don't think that has to do with their sexuality. I think it has to do with their control of sexuality. But that, again, the men have this chaotic energy, and the women are orderly and structured, and therefore they make better employees in the corporate workforce. Surprise, surprise. Okay, now the last thing I wrote here, I hope it's funny. Most men complain about the constrictions of married life. And this I found to be true in my therapy practice over many years. And most women complain about their husband's tendency towards chaos. You know, men are complaining about the way women are, that they want order and structure, and women are complaining about the men because they're chaotic and their energy is not focused without a lot of help. And that's where the Torah comes in. Of course, the mitzvot do not run away from our problems. The mitzvot help solve our problems. And that is, of course, channeling all that male energy in the right places. Okay, I feel like I've talked enough, but we haven't done our meditation. So let's take a 2-minute break, and I'll be right back. And then we'll do a little meditation on some of these ideas. And continue the celebration of Tu B'Av. Okay, I hope everybody's ready. As always, we need protection from the outside world, which means turn off the phones, turn off the loudspeakers. I think my favorite button on my phone is do not disturb, right? So let's get comfortable. So tonight's meditation will be along the lines of the class we just spoke of, the union of heaven and earth and man and women. Let's make sure our posture is relaxed, comfortable. Our feet are flat on the floor, our hands on our knees, our shoulders just falling naturally into place, as well as our heads. Let's begin to breathe through our nose. Long, easy breath. Inhaling life. Exhaling the absence of life. We pause at the top of each breath. We exhale as much as we can and still remain comfortable. In Jewish meditation, breath is a tool, it is not a goal. Once our rhythm of breathing is established, we rise from the nose on the tree of life to the forehead, the inner eye. The inner screen, the theater of the third eye, the eyes of the intellect. This is the great interface between the human being and his divine soul, between the creator and the created. Continue breathing. Heaven, the godly realm, the source, needs a place to express itself, and that is earth, all the material realm. So too man, the male gender, needs to express its power into the female realm, the realm of earth, the place of creation, place of producing new life. This is not news to anyone. But here, before Tu B'Av, the great reunion of the 11 tribes of Israel with the 12th tribe of Benjamin, even justice was sacrificed for the continuity of the nation, the in perpetuity of the tribe, all 12, reflecting 12 constellations, the 12 main faces of the cosmic tree. On this day, we celebrate the simple people, not wealth, not extravagant lifestyles, or even intellect. Celebrate the next generation and the importance of being married for ourselves, for the future. But the relationship of God to earth and man to woman also happens within. That each of us have a male side and each of us have a female side. And each side needs the other to be whole, to be able to give and receive. Let us breathe with the consciousness that my masculine side gives to my feminine side. And my feminine side receives with a full heart and then gives back to that which gave to her. May we all merit that union of self to erase, remove the fears of a gender-bound culture locked in stereotypes of what is healthy, what is male, what is healthy and female. These are questions we don't have to ask, for our bodies tell us. Our bodies guide us to the wholeness we lacked when we entered this world. And we see this paradigm in the mind. There is a part of us that speaks and a part of us that listens. We do it so much we don't even know we do it. That our higher mind speaks so softly we don't hear him. And our lower mind speaks so loud that we can't hear anything else. So here in meditation, we silence the lower mind with the hope of hearing the spark, the message from our upper soul, which is our link to the infinite soul, the one living being. Let us be silent in order to hear. Let us be at peace in order to think. Let us think in order to know. The one who speaks reality into existence. And to know his message for us today. When you think in your own mind. Listen to how you speak to yourself. And that will tell you a great deal about your relationship to our Creator. How we speak to ourselves in the privacy of our own minds will fill volumes of who we are, who we need to be, and are capable of becoming, and we're designed to be. Let us listen, and we will know. It's so hard to leave the inner mind in peace, but we must. Okay, we have a few more minutes. If anybody wants to share something, I see Rhonda writes, his will was the combined, I guess God's will was the combined will, but Adam was unhappy with that. I have a feeling I think I know what you're saying, Rhonda, but I don't want to guess. I'd rather you clarify for us what you're suggesting.
You were saying that the man cannot say that he was made according to Hashem's will, because the first man, Adam, was created according to Hashem's will, and he complained. So then that Hashem created Chava from him. So Chava was created from his new will, but man was the result of that separation, not Hashem's original will.
I think you're onto something here. Pardon me.
But just based on what you were saying, I never saw it that way before. It's just a new insight I got.
Right. So I want to get it right. You're saying that when Chava and Adam were one, they were created according to God's will, just like Chava's blessing, Shasali Karitzono. And then Adam fell from that level. And therefore, he was no longer at the level of making that blessing.
Not exactly. First, they were combined and he was not satisfied, but that was Hashem's will. Otherwise, he wouldn't have created them that way. So as a result of Adam's complaint, he separated Chava. So
that's Adam's complaint here.
His complaint, I think he felt lonely, no?
Well, I hate to tell you, the Midrash is a little bit more explicit. It says that Adam went around naming all the creatures in the garden before he met Chava? Before there was no Chava there to meet, right? Adam's original job, remember Adam and Eve were one at this time in the story. Their original job, even though they're one, was to give names. And some of the commentators in the Midrash say that Adam actually unified with the creatures. Of course, they're all non-physical, so it's, God forbid, it's anything disgusting like that suggestion, but that Adam and Eve together had the ability to penetrate the brain of every creature and know its essence, and therefore give it its name.
Yeah.
And you're saying he got lonely being the two of them as one, got lonely being Adam, but now you're pinning that and calling that on what was your language? Complaint about being alone. But God's the one that said lo tov leot levado. Adam didn't say it. I don't want to be lonely. But what you're saying is still has truth, because when Adam finally sees Chava, he says, zeh basar basari, v'etzem atzami. Right? This is the flesh of my flesh and the bone of my bone. He recognized himself in her, which he didn't say about any of the other creatures that he named. So the implication is that he was excited, he was happy with this new creation that he found. And you wonder, did he know that it came out from his own essence? Because it says that God put him in a trance. You know, it was like a divine blackout. He didn't know what was happening.
Well, that's because men can't handle the pain of birth.
Right. They can't handle the pain of birth, so they would black out. So they can't.
So, you know, then he gave the job to us.
Very interesting. I like the line of what you're thinking here. I'm writing down his complaint was implicit that he didn't like being alone. But I gave a drush to a woman's weekend we had, where the interesting thing here is if Chava is Adam's, if Chava, we know that Chava is Adam's essence, and we know that women were given 9/10 of the power of speech, because she's Malchut and Malchut is speech, that when Chava was extracted from Adam, she took 9/10 of the speech with her. And so that idea in itself is also touching on this paradigm between the male and the female, and that we see how speech is distributed. Now, of course, it's changed again in our generation. But I always remember my grandfather's just being very quiet, and my grandmother's just talking all the time. Now, I don't know if everybody else experienced it that way, but that was a few years ago.
Yep, mine were like that too.
That was an older generation. I don't know if it's still like that, but I imagine there's some things, withstand the test of culture and time. But thank you for your insight. Let's see, how's everybody else doing out there? Yaakov, Wayne, Ariel, I hope you've had a good week. And this class.
Yeah, thanks. Yes. Yeah.
And whoever needs to get married, may you be blessed to find the right one.
Amen.
And find the right things. Not worry about the superficial things.
Amen.
Really, to find your true friend, your true other half.
Amen.
Classes for Shaul ben Yaakov and You know, if anybody has anybody they'd like to sponsor a class for it, I think it's a wonderful thing to, because we don't understand how Torah here is looked at up there. Torah down here is like, you know, you get a billion hits on some pop star, some silly song, and you know, we get a handful of people that want to listen to Torah. So up there, it's quite the opposite. I guarantee you, they're not listening to what's that kid's name? Whatever, the pop stars that are getting, you know, they're not getting the hits in heaven. And those hits are supposed to go for those souls that we dedicate to. So we should all be blessed with that ability. And let's see, next week we will continue. So have a great week, everyone, and a great Shabbat. And we will carry on.
You
All the
too.
best. Good night.
Thank you.